we always have to be ready for possibilities. We can't wait for permission to be thinking about what we think is important. But just because we're ready doesn't mean those opportunities are going to present themselves. But we still have to keep those plans, those ideas in the wing. So when they're ready, we just like, okay, oh, I need to make some tweaks. We're ready. Here it is. Here's this idea. Here's this plan. Oh, students have been talking about this for a long time. You want to speak to some of them? We're ready because we're constantly in connection. So sometimes it's
Definitely. Um, what are your what are your short-term and long-term goals for advancing inclusion and belonging on campus?
as I mentioned, I think the concern now is just stabilizing the Office of Equity Programming. I do think that we're down, right? We're restructuring the office. That's going to be a big part of it. We're also reconnecting with students, given all the transitions. But we do have an opportunity too. We're gonna be hiring a director, an executive director at some point, a coordinator, and this is something that we're gonna continue to unfold. The restructuring is taking a little bit of time, but we're moving forward. A lot of that has happened in the background, but we have some good things to share. But we'll be doing some hiring this academic year and probably over the summer. So that's going to give us an opportunity to kind of staff up. And once that is done, I'll, take the larger institutional role. Because a lot of what I've been doing is playing almost like a pseudo director of the space, because that's what's been most needed. But we need to build our Title VI infrastructure. Title VI is kind of similar to Title IX, which is on sexual harassment and such, and sexual assault. Title VI is for race, color, national origin, as well as shared ethnic characteristics and shared ancestry. And that's been really big in the last 2 years, ever since, the Israeli-Gaza, Hamas violence in Palestine, which has created just a whole set of tensions on college campuses related to Title VI. So we're going to be building an infrastructure similar to Title IX. Everybody gets trained. We have specific policies and procedures that are formalized. We're kind of building that as we implement it. So even though the federal government hasn't issued specific guidelines like exist for Title IX, they're coming, and we're working on that as well. So that's something that I'm working on with Michelle Carter, who's Assistant Vice President and Director of Title IX. So those are our priorities, but that's going to take some time also. And I still, I've been here 10 months. I still, I would love to learn how I can support kind of the larger institutional goals around the area formerly known as DEI, while also adhering to the latest Supreme Court decisions, the admissions decision on 2023, and then dealing with this administration that interprets the law in a much more narrow way around what schools are allowed to do in order to support a diverse student body, staff, and faculty. So we want to make sure we're doing that consistent with the law, and while also moving forward. It's really important, but it's getting harder.
Most definitely.
When I was a graduate student, I got a fellowship just for students of color. You could still do that through affirmative action. You had to be qualified, but you could still do that. But after the 2001 Supreme Court cases, those things began to get chipped away, and it's becoming even more restricted. And we may disagree with it, but it is our responsibility to adhere to what the Supreme Court says is the law of the land.
Yeah, I can definitely see why those type of goals and initiatives would take so long, with again wanting to satisfy and do good by the students, but also not break the law.
Yeah, no, we have to. We run a lot of risk, and but we also want to. I think also those laws also protect everyone, right? We don't want to promote a good at the expense of someone else. It's not a zero-sum game. For women to be elevated in STEM doesn't mean we don't care about men.
Yeah, of course.
For us to celebrate, Asian American Heritage Month doesn't mean we don't care about, other groups, right? So, and I think sometimes experienced that way.
Yeah.
Whether intentional or not, or whether just because people think that none of that should exist. We shouldn't think that way. Well, you know, we may disagree. You know, we're celebrating, not denigrating others. And I think, I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone.
Almost definitely, yeah. You know, that type of stuff can very easily get like lost in translation with like how celebration can be seen as exclusion for a lot of people. And sometimes, like you said, indirectly it does happen, which is very unfortunate.
Right, it can.
And so I love how you guys are trying to like be very crystal clear about like what the intentions are and how to do right by the students. You know, being able to navigate this very like tricky landscape with both like politics and stuff like that, but still be able to try and are working towards still like building a campus life that would make everyone feel belonged.
Yeah, we want everyone to feel that sense of community. It may not resonate the same way. It might be, this beautiful campus. It might be a combination of the, clearly what you're learning, the friends you make, the communities you're able to participate in, the connections with faculty, some combination. But we want all students to get that, not just a specific subset of students. And bottom line, we want you to be successful, right? We want you to be successful the way you define that for yourself.
All right. Next question is, how do you balance changing policies and also shifting campus culture?
Though, they're part of a holistic approach. I think they don't have to necessarily, sometimes you have more opportunities. I think with the new president now, Dr. Phillips, I had the pleasure of serving under Dr. Tawanda Jordan for 6 months. But those 6 months were wonderful. Now we have another president whose background and kind of scholarly and leadership experience resonates deeply. But with the new president, there's an assessment. All right, what's possible? What should we be thinking about? So that's an opportunity that might not be in place when you have a more established kind of administration, which has kind of focused on their goals. Dr. Jordan went through 3 strategic plans. All right, well, what are going to be the emphases here? And what possibilities? We always have to be ready for possibilities. We can't wait for permission to be thinking about what we think is important. But just because we're ready doesn't mean those opportunities are going to present themselves. But we still have to keep those plans, those ideas in the wing. So when they're ready, we just like, okay, I need to make some tweaks. We're ready. Here it is. Here's this idea. Here's this plan. Oh, students have been talking about this for a long time. You want to speak to some of them? We're ready because we're constantly in connection. So sometimes it's going to be policy. Sometimes it's going to be culture. It just really depends on, kind of other things that are not always in your control. But you have to anticipate those needs for when those opportunities do arise. And sometimes you're going to be part of creating those opportunities. Other times, you're going to have to bide your time. I'll give you a very quick example. When I was at Providence College, this was right when, as Black Lives Matter emerged, Trayvon Martin was killed. George Zimmerman was found not guilty in his murder, which launched Black Lives Matter. But then in 2014, you had Eric Garner getting killed by a police officer chokehold in New York. You had Michael Brown being killed in Ferguson, and all the uprisings that kind of emerged from that. And then in 2015, those summers, there were police killings of black men in Minneapolis and another one in Louisiana. And then you had campus protests in the fall of 2015 that they just came out of nowhere. And these ideas that we had to build a new refurbished campus center focused on, kind of students of color, but open for everyone. All of a sudden, there was $1 million to do those renovations. They told us you could have the building before, but we don't have money for reservation. I'm like, I'll take the building. And next thing you know, $1 million, because the context shifted, they were ready to make investments, and we created a space that's unique, I think, and it's one of the proudest things I've ever done professionally. It's called the Center at Moore Hall. It's got art, it's got large spaces, small spaces, classrooms. It's beautiful. and the students were central in helping kind of inform that. But we were ready. It wasn't like it's going to take us 18 months to create the plans because we were already developing those plans. They told us we couldn't do it. All right. But when that happened, it was ready and it got done in a semester once that money got provided. So that's just one example of how sometimes policies are going to be helpful. Culture usually takes a lot more time, but is more enduring. But policies contribute. Shifting student population contributes, right? Being 28% first gen, that lends itself to a certain culture. Being diverse racially lends itself. We're 30%. 30% of our students are registered as neurodiverse. You're gonna learn how to support and engage neurodiverse students, whether you like it or not, because there's a critical mass, and if you want to do your job right, you're gonna learn, right? So I think that's gonna shift the culture, right? Who are the members of your community? So by intention and or by who we attract by our culture has produced what we are. And I think if we're good with that, then how do we sustain it? How do we nurture that? And if there are elements of our culture that we need to improve upon, then we need to be intentional about that.
Very interesting insight. Thank you so much. Next one is, what would you consider to be your most significant accomplishment up to this point in your life?
It's interesting. I've never been married, or I don't have children. I have a big family, which I'm grateful for. But I've thought about that question because a lot of people do that. I think I've thought a lot about this since I was first given this question. And I think my most significant accomplishment is a little boring. I've been able to live my purpose, and as my career, to support the growth, development, and success of others, to serve others. And that just goes with my values, being raised, my working class Puerto Rican family, my faith. I was raised Catholic, and I still, while I'm not, in church every weekend, the dignity of every person, that we don't exist in isolation, that we are parts of a larger whole. And those things were imbued in me early, and I'm really proud that that this is how I make a living. And it's not always easy, but I feel like I built a career that I'm proud of, not because everybody's telling you how wonderful you are, but that I'm proud of what I do. I love my job, and I felt like while I've never been perfect and I've made my mistakes, I've had a positive impact on others, and always gotten a chance to learn from others too.
That's great, and I don't think that answer is boring in a way.
Sometimes boring is the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a very cliche thing to be like, I'm just happy with what I'm doing, but truly like finding joy in what you're doing, and also feeling like the work that you're doing is having a profound impact on like your community, society, or what have you, is something that unfortunately is very rare nowadays. A lot of people, go into jobs where, like, I don't fault them for it, but like just go into like just to make money because you need money to live.
Totally.
But
student loans, kids, this, that,
rent, food, like everything is like being able to sustain yourself is very important. But wanting to and being able to achieve work where you're able to like meet like all three, where you're able to like sustain yourself, you love what you do, and also you feel like the work that you're doing has a positive impact and is doing good and is aligning with your personal values also, because I feel like many people in the pursuit of a career will, go against their values or go against their beliefs because they believe like that's the way that they have to do it, or certain industries will like prey upon that. But being able to find work that fits with your values, the job works for you, not you working for the job necessarily.
It aligns. And I feel very lucky. I think of Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's one of my favorite authors, and he has an earlier book called The Beautiful Struggle. Like, it's hard sometimes. You're sometimes in these rooms, and not necessarily here, but I've been in places where even good people kind of just don't get it, and they don't understand the hurt until the students are like screaming, and it's not because they don't care. and you're kind of banging your head, like not literally, but you're trying to get people to understand, and they're not resisting, or they're not, because they're bad people. But you also, I'm proud that I've tried to push, stretch, cajole, convince, debate, back off at times, but I'm proud that it's even, especially in places that people would never know, that I'm trying to stretch the school, and also leaving myself open to being stretched, open to being surprised, to different approaches that I don't have all the answers. So but I'm really proud of that. And it's not always easy. You leave yourself to disappointment, but what's better than than struggling from something you believe in with decent people? Because I've never worked with bad people. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so I can work with that. You know what I mean? People who can't see it, don't understand, don't agree, but I'm going to be in that mix, and I'm going to defend our students. I'm going to support our students. I'm going to support our staff. And so yeah, I feel very blessed in that regard.
Say like that takes a tremendous level of like humility and empathy to do what you do. So I applaud you for
I
it.
try my best. Like I said, look, I've made my mistakes, and but I know a lot of people, for them finding purpose has been a struggle. I've struggled with other aspects, right, of my professional career, like like everyone, not but knowing my purpose was never my struggle, and I feel very lucky in that regard. Because you're right, some people get, for a variety of reasons, find themselves in careers, in commitments that require they stay in roles that maybe demand so much time away from their family, so much compromising, right? Their own belief system, right? Going along with a leader because, hey, they're the boss. That's really hard when you're responsible for a mortgage, for your, the welfare of your family. Look, I can respect that, and that's a struggle in its own right.
Say, what advice would you give to a student who wants to go into this field someday?
Let's talk. First and foremost. So if there's somebody at St. Mary's campus, let's talk. If you want to learn more, let's figure out how you can do that starting now. I think, I came in from my background in sociology. I don't have like a higher ed degree. People come into this work from wherever, English background, as administrators, you know, liberal arts, STEM, what have you. I do think you got to care about students, but you also have to, I don't know. I think it's more than just caring about students. There's some of the boring things that have to happen: the planning, the budgeting, the meetings. You have to do those things. The engagement, the fundraising. I can do that. I can ask people to invest in something I believe in, but embrace the things that give you maybe the most inspiration, but then also you have to do those things that may be more banal, but embrace those things because they allow you to have the impact you're going to have. So, but have a conversation with someone who has a role that you think is interesting. You'd be surprised. But bring who you are, your background, your experience, your intellectual interests. Mine happen to be sociology, history, psychology. I use those every day, looking at structures, at systems, looking at things like stereotype threat, right, to inform how we operate. So it's both with the heart, with the spirit, but also, intellectually engage those questions, because we can get really creative when we integrate all those things.
Definitely. And then just finishing off with our last question here.
Sure.
What is something people might be surprised to learn about you?
Well, I mentioned I've never been married and I don't have children. I have a big family, so I don't know. I think at a certain age, people are like, really? You ain't got what's wrong with you? I feel good. I'm good with that. I think as far as other things, I don't know. Surprised maybe. Before I got to St. Mary's, I went to Spain and I did this what's called the Camino de Santiago. It's a Catholic pilgrimage, and I walked across Spain, 550 miles, 40 days. And I learned of that during my time at Fordham. Even though I was raised Catholic, I hadn't heard of it, and it was just a really wonderful experience. So that's more kind of a conversation point. But this is a pilgrimage that people have been doing since the year around the year 810, 810, not 1810, but 810. And it was physically most challenging physically, but I was able to do it spiritually and mentally. I loved it. The landscape was beautiful. I met some people from all over the world. That was a lot of fun. I don't know. I've been fired from like 3 or 4 jobs, mainly like when I was in high school and college. Yeah. But there are also times. There's been a time where I've been invited to kind of like, hey, we're gonna move on. You know what I mean? I've been in that situation too. So the question, as like a grown professional, and I had been around long enough to know that wasn't personal. It's like sometimes leadership wants, to bring in people that they want, and I feel like I'm very adaptable, but it happens. Getting fired happens. Having a breakup happens. You know what I mean? Like things that you don't anticipate. Suffering, the loss of a loved one can happen. But anyway, yeah, I've been fired a few times, and I'm good with that. But yeah, I think I was racking my brain for that. That's the best I could come up with.
I feel like, especially with just like any sort of professional, especially working in like a academic sense, I feel like a lot of people would be very surprised to hear of like any significant failures, because especially when you're very young, you think that like all professionals, they knew exactly what they were doing. Their road was crystal clear. They got there very easily. That's why they're in the position that they are now, especially like for like leadership positions.
Sure.
You think that like leaders are flawless and perfect, and that's why they lead, because they know all the answers. It's they know what they're doing because they messed up so many times.
Well, look, if you haven't failed, have you really tried?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a safe road, and I think there's a safe road, and I think if you don't take risks, like you have to take wise risks. Like there has to be a rationale of thinking, a sense of a place of values that this is why this is important. I've disagreed with my bosses before, respectfully. I don't think I've ever had a situation where somebody was doing something so egregious that I had to just resign. Never, and I'm grateful for that. But you have to take risks. You have to, vulnerability is part of life, and I think it allows you to kind of to not question whether you should have done something. Look, never 100%, right? But I feel like I'm not uncomfortable stretching myself, stretching others, even if it might risk a relationship with someone in authority. Not because I like to be a pain, but because I believe what I believe. So I think I've been able to do that in ways that people understand that it's coming from a place of belief, not personal. So yeah.
Amazing. I feel like especially like many people have issues with, not issues, but questions and like concerns about, going into any sort of professional thing, but like having a mix of being like your professional persona, but also still being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
So especially with the experience of, like stretching yourself, especially that, I feel like that kind of like not narrows the gap, but like definitely helps people understand what they like, what it means to, still do the work that you want to do and do it well, but also still put yourself into it. So that way it's done well and it's done for yourself.
And there are going to be elements of your job that you're not going to be as prepared for. You're going to have to learn those by doing them. And so don't let that stop you from applying for an opportunity. You know what I mean? Oh, but I've never done this piece. Okay, but what have you done? So stretch yourself. In my first job, there were times I'm like, I didn't do program development. Like I knew the elements of like, but I've never had to execute. Never. So I had to slip and fall a little bit. It caused a little bit of anxiety and insecurity, but I fought through it. And I was supported by folks. But, and then there were people who was like, you need a mentor, like got in my face. And I was like, damn, but they weren't wrong. And sometimes, you can't be mad at people when You might not always appreciate it in the moment, but I've been in that situation, and there have been situations where it's like, we need you to do better. So not because it's personal, but that's what we need for this role to be successful, for this office, for this mission to be accomplished, and that means having a positive impact with students.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you so much for like the support that you've done in the past and what you're doing now with students. It has been amazing talking to you and
thank you,
hearing your
Nyasha.
great insight. Of course, thank you so much, Rafael. And it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and just hearing like you answering all your questions and taking time out of your day for this. Truly appreciate it, and the career development department also like truly appreciates it.
Man, like the career development, the Center for Career and Professional Development, like we did Hot Ones. We've done some other things lately. They're like my collaboration buddies. Like, so I'm always down. Wellness Day, they were a big part of it. So, and now it's been my absolute pleasure. I'm always down to connect with students, always here to support them as a guest, as as some, in any number of ways. So this is actually a gift. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.